Welcome back. We're discussing the long-term implications of the shooting attack at Fort Hood, Texas last week. Joining me are Dahar Jamel, an independent journalist and author who has covered American troops in Iraq extensively. He's joining us from Los Angeles. And here in the studio with me is Ahmed Rehab, who heads the Chicago office of the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR as it's known. Dahar, on that issue of Jim in Virginia, the issue that Jim raised, it really comes down to a question of loyalties. You know, what sort of issue have you come across when talking to soldiers when it comes to questioning whether it's possible to be in the U.S. military and be a Muslim at the same time, considering the current circumstances? And could there be some kind of consideration given to perhaps exempting Muslim soldiers or some kind of dispensation if they're asked to go into conflict zones which largely involve Muslims?
Well, so far from what I've been hearing from soldiers that I'm talking with in the wake of this tragedy is one of the first things I heard was from a private right there at Fort Hood who was in lockdown when all of this was happening. And I talked to him the day after it occurred, and he said, look, we consider ourselves all green here. We're all in the Army. No one was really focusing that much on the fact that whether he's a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or any other religion or a belief system. So that just really wasn't a big concern. And I think in that way, this is largely an anomaly. We really haven't seen an incident like this, obviously, that draws religion into the fold like this. And another thing I would like to reiterate is that, if this continues and if people, who are Muslims serving in the military or any other religion, that this is going to force them into a moral dilemma. There is the ability, and this does exist within the military right now, where people can apply for conscientious objector status, where if their religion or spiritual beliefs, it doesn't even have to be an organized religion, if their spiritual moral beliefs basically cause them to become opposed to all wars, then the military has systems set up where they can apply for CO status, start going through this system, and then at the end of it, get an honorable discharge. And so this does exist today, and hopefully that's something that this incident will draw to more people's attention, so possibly could help avoid this in the future.
Ahmed, how do you regard the way the media has been handling this story?
I think in some cases it has been surprisingly in a pleasant way. They have been understanding of the situation and not jumping to blaming Islam, the faith itself, for the acts of a Muslim. In other cases, and usually it takes time for this to develop, we are seeing these attempts now to bring in, oh, the Allahu Akbar, therefore it must be an Islamic thing. Let's look at all Muslims and Islam itself. The problem with the pervasive Islamophobic discourse is the disposition to want to draw a normative narrative based on aberrational behavior. And so you have this individual, even if it is proven that he felt motivated by his particular interpretation of faith, that says nothing about the 1.5 billion Muslims around the world who do not agree with this interpretation, who, as a matter of fact, believe something to the contrary of this individual, assuming again that that is the case.
Once again, generalizations.
Right, exactly, and that's the name of the game for Islamophobia.
Well, let's get a call in from Philadelphia, and Claude's on the line. Claude, what would you like to ask?
Well, I just want to make a statement pertaining to the first guest that talked about whether this is a Muslim thing or not. Well, for me personally, I am not a U.S. citizen, but my uncle has been to war 3 times. And I feel like on this Veterans Day, this just brought home to a lot of people in America here who aren't really, who's not too particular about what side they're on. I'm not on like either side, but I feel like this really hurts a lot of people. And these are innocent people. My uncle's been to war 3 times, and this guy, he hasn't been to war before. And for him to say, well, he's tired or because of some redeployment and back and forth, other people wouldn't do this. And this have really hurt people because of that.
Interesting, Claude, interesting point. And actually, Dahar, this is one of the issues that people say that those going into the military obviously should know what to expect to some degree. Now, I wonder, when it comes down to the way people look at this and the timing, of course, we've got Veterans Day in the U.S. at the moment as well. Do you think Hassan can get a fair trial?
Well, clearly that is already out of the question. I mean, it's clear the military is going to try him, and having sat through a court-martial myself right there at Fort Hood earlier this summer of someone who actually had filed for conscientious objector status because they were opposed to all wars, not just going to Afghanistan, but all wars. And having filed for CO status, they were nevertheless court-martialed. And this individual, Sergeant Travis Bishop, is currently serving out a year term at a brig at Fort Lewis in Washington State. So just given that it's going to be be a military court, I think that absolutely precludes any possibility of this being a fair trial.
Ahmed, I mean, we should point out that, of course, this has involved 13 deaths and dozens of injuries as well, so it's a very serious matter.
And these are the real victims in the story before anything else.
Right, exactly. Now, one of the interesting things, I asked you about how the media is handling it. My team and I looked at across the world, and the rest of the world's media hasn't handled this in the same way. It doesn't take the same approach. It's less of a story in some ways, not because of the lack, because of the deaths or whatever. It's just a question of it's not seen with the same kind of Islamophobic attitude.
Well, there are those also who raise the following question: the trend of individuals shooting up their teammates or colleagues as a result of disgruntlement on the job, and we see this in postal offices, we see these in colleges and schools, is an American trend. It isn't an Islamic trend in the sense that it happens in America more than anywhere else. And so the question then becomes, why isn't this act seen within that narrative rather than within the narrative of, quote, jihad? Now, that's a question that's raised out there. The answer, of course, is for the viewers to find out.
Now, you're an alumnus of the FBI Citizens Academy and lead local efforts in Chicago and around to foster positive relationships with law enforcement officials, elected officials, and so on. And I'm wondering, what perspective have you been trying to give them? What real message have you been trying to get across to them? What sort of feedback have you had from them?
Well, the most important message I want to get across is to not project any type of misunderstanding of Muslims and Islam based on this individual's actions. The vast majority, as a matter of fact, all Muslims out there did not partake in this person's decision, and so the consequences of his decision should not reflect on them. I do want to give thumbs up to the military. The commanders in the military came out very clearly stating that this is not an issue of Islam and that they are concerned for the well-being of the Muslim community, and particularly the Muslim soldiers serving in Fort Hood and in other bases around the world.
Daher, again, from your experience with the military, what steps do you think will be taken now to try to take into account what has happened in terms certainly of issues of post-traumatic stress disorder and sort of pressure, mental pressure on soldiers with the kind of deployments that are taking place? We know that the current theatre of conflict, or the current theatres of conflict to which the soldiers are being sent, it's not normal. It's that much worse and more tense than before.
Correct. Unfortunately, we're hearing the same rhetoric right now in the wake of this tragedy as we did last May. Last May, when a U.S. soldier in Baghdad, serving at the end of his third deployment, walked into a PTSD clinic there and killed 5 other soldiers. And we heard immediate rhetoric from Secretary of Defense Robert Gates and Admiral Mike Mullen, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, saying, look, too many deployments. We need more time in between deployments. We need to up care soldiers are getting, psychological care, if they need help with PTSD. All absolutely spot on and should have happened. Since that time, we really haven't seen any real big definitive changes in policy that would take some of this stress off people in the military serving in both these occupations. And so now we are hearing some of that talk again now, and all we can do is hope that it will actually be implemented. So far, of course, it's very, very soon, so there hasn't been much time since it happened, but so far there haven't been any immediate any immediate indications that these policies are going to be implemented. But again, I think this really underscores when you have people being redeployed 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and not getting the psychological treatment that they need, and the stress this is putting on the military, clearly, again, this is something that this incident really underscores, that some massive policy changes need to be made within the military.
Sadly, Ahmed, I guess it looks like we really are taking, we've taken a major backward step as well. I want to thank you for coming in as well as Daher for joining us again on the show. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Of course, we'll be following the story of Major Hassan on the news here on Al Jazeera English, so do keep up with that. And thank you for being with us with your questions. Remember, if you have any ideas on pressing issues around the world, you can send them to us on Facebook. You can also see what we're planning for upcoming shows and post your feedback too. On the next show, for the first time, members of Osama bin Laden's immediate family reveal the private, everyday details of what life was like with the world's most wanted man. We speak with the author of Growing Up Bin Laden. Be sure to tune in for that. Bring in your questions for that too from me and the team. Until then, see you next time.